Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Vancouver Real. We are here with the full house actually in the Vancouver Real podcast studio from the street level podcast studio at 70 West Cordova Street at Float House. Floathouse.ca is our website. And back again, since I was on the solo podcast mission, is my brother Andy.
Hello everybody, it's good to be back. This is the first episode back in the new studio, which I'm very excited about because I painstakingly assembled this place, including the, what do you call those things on the ceiling?
Sound absorber foam.
Yeah,
things.
I had a method of getting two sticks to stick those things up there at the same time, and it was a pain in the ass, and I was really high and sweating a lot.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it. I did those.
So that's the sound reduction. It's gonna reduce some of the echo and I think our last episode, the audio quality was definitely great for our guest. Mine was a little off, but I think we have it honed in now with the second time around, and that's because primarily we have our main man back at the helm, Omid Pakman.
Hello everyone.
Omid,
yeah,
he's back.
Yeah, I hope I got this right. I think so.
I think you do.
It's been a while.
I know.
We have faith in you, Omid.
Yeah.
Without you, this thing wouldn't exist.
It's true.
For sure.
Well, it'd be like us on our iPhone, just putting it in the middle of the table, pressing record. But so with that being said, Omid is the man behind an amazing YouTube channel, Omega Point. He's also a very talented videographer, video productionist, musician, you name it. He's a jack of all trades, podcaster. It's pretty badass, the things that he can produce. So at the very least, go check out Omega Point on YouTube, like it on Facebook, and like I said, we are podcasting here at a Float House, which is Vancouver's first commercial float center in over 20 years. We opened back in May of 2013. And, we're on quite a little journey with that as well. We have 2 locations here in Vancouver, a franchise in Victoria, one almost ready in South Surrey, which is going to be another franchise. And we just announced Langley, BC. So, we got floating coming at you full force. So floathouse.ca is our website, and if you want to try floating, use the promo code, what's a good one for today's topic? Vegan. You'll see the irony of that in a second. Save 20% with the promo code VEGAN towards a single float. You're welcome to use that as much as you want. So let's move on to today. So we wanted to, in the light of what's kind of probably been circulating around your social media platforms is, if you're in Canada especially, is the political elections that are just around the corner here in our nation. And we wanted to bring somebody on that, we always he's like our go-to guy for general information and questions, because he's always at least has a respectable idea or philosophy about it, or at least can kind of point us in the right direction to get more info. And that, of course, is the one and only Anarchist Lawyer, Alexander Boldizar. Welcome back, my friend.
Thanks, guys. It's great to be back.
Yes.
And congratulations on the amazing growth of Float House.
Thank you.
It's really impressive. So is the studio.
Thank you.
It looks so good.
Well, yeah, with Float House, we're not going to stop. We're just going to keep going until the whole world's floating, basically. That's just our mission.
That's what's happening. Yeah.
And I also want to reiterate Mike's laudatory comments about Omega Point and Omid's talents as a videographer.
Thanks.
He recently made a book trailer for my upcoming novel, and it's better than I could imagine. It's perfect.
Cool.
So do check out Omega Point.
Alex has been our friend now for quite a while, and actually, I consider you one of the thought leaders that I go to. You're actually a thought leader. I go to you, and I before I write anything, I'm always like, what would Boldizar say about this? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what would his response be? And I literally think about what you might think about something before I write it, and I'll cross-reference, what would Boldizar think? Because you have this interesting perspective that it's sometimes hard to wrap your head around, and sometimes hard to accept, but I feel like there's always some kind of element of truth there, and I have to be like, yeah, it's got a point.
Well, I'd say an element of objectivity that's kind of irrefutable. You'll say something, you're like, well, yeah, that yes, you're right in that sense, and this is obviously very vague and non, localized. But there's always that element of, okay, that's a very. It seems like you have a skill of being able to bring an idea and then support it very logically.
No, thank you. I don't strive for truth. I do strive for rationality.
Wouldn't that be the same?
I don't think so. I think truth has. There often. You need to unpack the word truth. There's often an intermediate truth and an ultimate truth, and truth is very much depends on how you frame a question. And I when I was a teenager, I was obsessed with Nietzsche, and Nietzsche has I can't quote it verbatim anymore, but he has basically a saying about truth is a series of metaphors that we've forgotten our metaphors, that we've used so often that it has become kind of ingrained in our society as an accepted fact without questioning anymore. Because we're always creating truth based on how much distance we give to an idea, how we frame the context. And each of those decisions is creating a different truth. And so, if anything, what I try to do is argue against truth, not in the sense of being pro-lie, but Ingmar Bergman once said that out of every minute of a movie, 27 seconds are blank space. So there's a lie in every narrative, in every story. We can't create, we wouldn't be creative subjects without mixing truth and lie in different ways. And I think a lot of people who peddle truth, those are the people I've considered dangerous. So what you're talking about in terms of my attacking, I prefer to break down ideas and show where what people are claiming to be truth, there's a lot of subjectivity in there, and let's try and unpack that. Let's see where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. You and I were talking about. We just for people to know, we met about like a month ago, maybe at a bar close to my place, and we talked for 3 hours. And one of the subjects that I'm really interested in that I brought up with you is how people think in a black and white type of pattern. Like even before looking into reasoning or evidence, they just take a side and then they go on after that. Like what is there to support where I stand? So black and white, they choose what they want and they go for it. It seems like what you and I share is that we tend to question both sides usually. I mean, that's what I do. I always I try to, like, one of the subjects like politics that we're going to talk about today, I always try to question both sides. And immediately after you question people, they put you on the other side, on the other side of the spectrum. And they just don't understand that there is this middle ground that you can be. And you can be a curious person just wanting to know, the facts. And
it's very important to be able to entertain an idea without necessarily accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a loss in our liberal education system that how few people are able to really fully immerse themselves in an idea and play it out all the way through without necessarily accepting it as their dogma. And I think it's almost like a rationalist backdoor into empathy. Not empathy on a human level, but empathy on a philosophical level, that let's put myself in somebody else's shoes, see the world how they see the world, think, what will convince a conservative, for example, that injection sites are good? Okay, what's their value system? Instead of just dismissing them as being inherently evil people, you try and place to yourself into a conservative mindset, their value system, and okay, what kind of arguments will work on them? I'm referring to this because of the Facebook discussion about the injection sites. It's just the most recent thing that came up, so it's a handy example. But I do think it's very, very important to be able to enter even the most alien ideas and try to understand them. Both, if you're in a fight, you want to understand how your enemy moves, but also in a human empathetic level, and in order to get anything done intellectually.
That's right.
And that's why you're here. because you can piece things together really well. And just for anyone that hasn't seen the past episodes with Alex, we've had him on twice now. The first time was just kind of introducing you, and I don't remember what we talked about. It was a
We're talking
great.
about Ukraine.
Yes, that's right. We were talking about the Ukraine issues.
And there was a debate one with them.
Yes, and then we
Roy.
had actually, I guess it was kind of like another, not necessarily political, but it was pseudo-political plus like kind of just a more philosophical ideology kind of debate back and forth of a political, conservative versus liberal sort of sides, just kind of discussing that. And then, and today we wanted to bring you on because it is getting close to election time. And we did kind of actually put forth to you a little bit of a challenge. So like, hey, can you kind of do a little bit of your, skimming research and just with your background knowledge, like you always seem to have a good ability to extract like what the general aims and goals of a certain party are. And then, so our goal with this episode was trying to bring together, in a nutshell, what are the different parties of our political system, which are Green Party, NDP, Liberal, Conservative. Those are really the top four. What do they bring to the table? What's their kind of stance? There's their platform, and how it's kind of going so far in this, kind of media debacle of the election process, I guess. So that's kind of why we invited you in today. And he did mention that he was just a recently published author, which is going to be released in the new year, right?
In May, yes.
So we're going to have him on again to talk more about that, which is really exciting. But it's called The Ugly, just as a little trailer for that. But today we brought you in for your political, angle. And so if you're kind of like, where do I want to vote? I want to vote, but I don't know anything. This is why this episode is here, so you can at least have a little bit of a background.
Well,
So-
I do hope we can make a bit of a debate format.
Okay.
Because I don't purport to be an expert on the stances of the parties. I have been following the election a bit recently, but I'm guilty of reading New York Times more than the Globe and Mail. So I do have a sense of the different parties, and I definitely just undermine my position right from the beginning and any
Fair enough.
any worth of my opinion. I haven't voted in 20 years.
Fair enough.
And this will be the first election I will vote
Nice.
in 20 years. And I don't know if you mind, but I want to explain why I haven't voted in 20 years first.
Please.
And I think it's very relevant to where I want to go with part of this conversation anyway. Is I often get the comment, well, if you don't vote, you don't really, you don't have a say. And my reasoning behind not voting is it was very similar to somebody voting for a party in their district that's running third, for example. In a sense, you're making a statement rather than trying to make an active change. As much as I was really impressed with Elizabeth May in the leaders' debate, I was the most impressed by her. I wouldn't vote Green if they have 6% in my district, just because it'll be basically throwing away my vote. And the reason I didn't vote is because, you guys have billed me as the Anarchist Lawyer, and the idea of voting, the act of voting on a symbolic level, if you're making a statement, is you're basically giving up, you're abdicating your individual sovereignty to a representative. In a political system where your representative is lying to you, that becomes a deeply irrational act. This representative promises to do a bunch of stuff, they're lying, and you're still making the symbolic act of giving them your individual sovereignty for the sake of being part of the group. It's not going to happen, and the only symbolic thing you're doing is you're legitimizing that government because you voted, whether for the party that won or against it. You participated, you won or you lost, but you've given up your right to basically bitch about the system. You can bitch about the political party, but you don't really have the right to bitch about the system because you participated. And you see this often in third world countries or more dictatorships where people will boycott a vote. Because basically it's a rigged vote, so they boycott it. I'm not suggesting Canadian voting is rigged, although the Conservatives did cheat in 2006. But I'm not suggesting the Canadian system is rigged, but it is rigged in a more macro sense, in the same way that they've done studies where if you give prisoners the right to rearrange the furniture in their cells, the level of riots in the prison goes down drastically. And for a long time, the voting system, you were basically rearranging the furniture. The general movement was going in the same direction. The people with money, the corporations, they chose what was going to happen to the country. And the actual input of an individual person or of the population as a whole even was minimal. Except for very marginal things here and there, you're basically moving the furniture around. What I do think is different about this election um, is that the conservatives have done so much damage to this country. Um, and we were talking before about getting in somebody else's head. I do want to talk to, I have conservative friends, and I do want to, I don't know how many conservative viewers you have, but if you have a political party that consistently breaks the law, if you Google Canadian political scandals, there's a sheet, I actually printed it out. The sheet goes down back to 1870s of all the Canadian political government scandals. More than half are the current conservative government.
Wow.
Like it's crazy. The In and Out scandal, where from uh, sorry, from 2007, where they were basically cheating with the elections. The Mike Duffy stuff, where they were lying. Mike Duffy himself, individual senators, this will always happen. People will cheat on their expenses or whatever. But then the prime minister's chief of staff try to cover it up. You have scandal after scandal, and conservatives, in my view, they tend to be two types. They're the dead enders, the Christian coalition types who will always vote conservative, no matter what. But then there's also the people who want a small government, who want kind of low taxes, small government, and I'd appeal to those people to think, if you vote back in a government that has so consistently broken the law, so consistently said government is above any checks and balances, all you're sending a message to all the political parties that they can get away with anything. Once they're in power, they can do what they want. And so voting back Harper, even if your values are conservative, at least stay home. Like, don't vote. Everybody's telling you to vote, but voting for a government that has so consistently cheated and abused the system and have contempt for, the conservatives are not giving media interviews anymore. Harper doubled the election time because he had more money. He doesn't want to do more debates. More, I think it's 2 or 3 total. There's one next Thursday, but so he's snubbed his nose at the media, at the population, at the law, at the Supreme Court. If you vote in a government with that kind of dictatorial tendencies, it's kind of a paradigm shift. You're saying that once you're in power, you can do whatever the hell you want, and as long as you hire the right consultants and spend the right amount of money, you can get away with it. And that's such a dangerous message that even if you agree with the conservatives on the issues, I think it would be dangerous to vote back in.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of you, man, there's so many things in there that I want to address, but like, I guess just generally going back, let's talk about the conservatives first, since this is kind of on the topic now. What do you think, like, they're like?
I was going to interject one
Sure.
thing real quick.
Yeah.
Do you think you could give, for somebody who really has no idea about any of the political parties whatsoever, kind of an overall like breakdown traditionally of like their philosophies, their values, what they stand for, in terms of conservative, liberal, green, and NDP? Could you just kind of give like an overall synopsis of what each party is about or what they say they're about?
I think it's very difficult to do because without getting into very substance of the issues, traditionally the spectrum would be conservatives on the right and then a 3-way progressive split or left split between liberal, NDP, and green, with liberal being traditionally in the middle, NDP being the furthest left, and green being primarily oriented around the environment, but now becoming even more left of the NDP. It's hard to tell depending on the issues, but this election has flipped things around in different ways. Trudeau, for example, is the only one who's talking about being willing to tolerate deficits in order to stimulate the economy. That traditionally is a Keynesian economic position. It's a liberal economic position, whereas Mulcair is talking about balancing the budget, which traditionally is a right-wing position.
That's an NDP person, Mulcair?
And NDP is the NDP. And so what you've seen in this election, in some ways, on certain issues, the Liberals have actually stepped left of the NDP, whereas the NDP, I think, trying to capture the responsibility, or they're economically sounding more conservative in some ways. Um, and on this particular issue, I think the NDP are wrong. I think economists have known since the Great Depression that in a recession, which we're in a recession now in Canada, in a recession, deficit spending is not a bad thing. People there's this weird association with family budgets because people simplify difficult concepts, and they understand economic spending the same way as they would understand their own family budget. But in a family, when you spend money, you're paying somebody outside your family that money, so that money is flowing out of your family. In an economy, the overwhelming majority of your debt is owned by your own citizens, and so deficit financing works in recessionary environments. It doesn't chase away growth. The traditional critique of deficit spending would be that you print money and you end up getting inflation. But right now, the risk is deflation. Right now, interest rates are so low that there's no cost to corporations sitting on huge hoards of cash. With interest rates is zero, real interest rates is zero, corporations are sitting on massive amounts of cash. So it basically undoes the central bank's ability to stimulate the economy, because no matter what they do, those corporations will sit on the cash. You give them a tax break. If there's a shortage of demand, which there is, they're just going to sit on the cash. It just stagnates the whole economy. So if you want an economy going, you want inflation of around 1 or 2%. You don't want it at 20%, but an inflation of around 2% is ideal. It shrinks your debt over time because the value of that debt shrinks as inflation goes up, and it creates a cost of sitting on money and leaving it stagnant. So it increases the velocity of money, increases economic activity. But the American right has, with the whole austerity movement, has convinced everybody that responsible people balance their budgets, which over a very long time, yes, you need to balance the budget. But the power of a central bank is that in a surplus time, you run a surplus, or in economic boom times, you run a surplus. In recessions, you run a deficit, and then you balance it over those things. But you don't balance it year on year, or then you can't modulate the business cycle. So you have the full swing, the full roller coaster ride of the business cycle, which is a natural part of the capitalist system. But a central bank has the power to soften that, the impact of that business cycle. But the American right, now increasing the UK right and the Canadian right, has bought onto this idea of that responsible people balance their budgets. So they push austerity, which is over and over. It's shrinking economic growth. And the reason that there's a bit of a malicious reasoning behind that, because if you can argue for balanced budgets, it gives you an excuse to take away social spending. And conservatives have not a rational but a emotional problem with the idea of a lot of social services. They don't like the idea of giving money that everybody pays for healthcare, for example. They think you should take care of your own health. And so, but they can't say that, because if they say, we don't want healthcare, we don't want social programs, we don't want education to be free, everybody should go to private school and pay, they'll lose elections. So what they've moved to is the idea of starving the beast. And the starving the beast is starving the government revenues. And the way to do that is to just push austerity. It's responsible to balance your budget. We have to cut the spending because that's the responsible thing to do. And people are scared of arguing back. And because the NDP is vulnerable to the attack of being fiscally reckless, which they have been in the past, it's a valid point. You can always overdo the deficit spending. You can't be just out of balance for years on end, and you can't be doing that during boom times, because then what you end up doing is you push out private investment. It's a whole different aspect of the economy. But during a recession, there are extra workers, there are unemployed people who need jobs. So creating government programs to build infrastructure, for example, is not going to push up the wages, which will create pressures on private companies. It will not drive out private investment because there's extra capacity in the economy. During a boom, there isn't extra capacity. So if the government starts building a bridge during a boom period in the economy, those workers, their wages will go up. It will end up increasing the cost of private investment. And so yes, during a boom time, the conservative arguments make sense. you are driving out private investment. And so all these things are much more complicated, but they're all simplified down to bumper sticker slogans about balancing the budget or whatever.
Now, pretend that you're talking to a bumper sticker crowd, because when you talk to me about politics and economics, especially, you definitely are. So, so going back to the original question, I guess, of where you would put them all kind of traditionally in terms of their values, and you said, from what I gather there, is that you said that they'll all kind of fall on a scale between right and left, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
So then
that's the popular scale, yes.
Okay. Let's say if we break it down to this level. Well, if we break it down, what would be your definition, or maybe the agreed upon definition of the extreme, the right and the left? Like, how would you separate the two, and how would you distinguish the two?
Again, it's very, very complicated because all of these categories break down. The right tends to argue for small government. They're all inconsistent. The problem is they're all internally inconsistent. And so, for example, the right will argue for small government unless it's abortion, in which case they want the government to control what the woman does with her body. They'll argue for small government, but then they'll oppose legalizing drugs even though you're not harming anybody other than yourself. So they think, a conservative will think to himself or herself that I am pro-small government. But usually what they mean is, on a fiscal level, they want to keep their own money and not have it taken away from them and used for, they don't want to tax and spend on other things. But then you have the libertarians, who, it's less relevant in Canada, but libertarians will want small government. A lot of libertarians will be pro-drugs. They're against the war on drugs. They're against the police state that's developing in a lot of the world. They don't want more militarization of the cops. So they'll side with liberals on a lot of issues. Like Roy, who was on here, he's a traditional conservative. He's a small c conservative. But the right tends to be made up of small c conservatives and small government conservatives, like libertarians. But even libertarians have changed. I used to write for Liberty magazine, which was a joint libertarian anarchist magazine, and they were always pro-abortion. It's like it's nobody's business other than the woman's. But then you see the Tea Party, which claims they're libertarian, and they're against abortion, and then they'll have crazy economic ideas. And it used to be in the 70s, liberals didn't understand economics. Now it seems like it's flipped, where it's the conservatives who start with first principles. They don't want to bother with learning how the economic system works. It's all very first principles based. This is wrong. And so the question you're asking me is kind of impossible. I can give you the standard answer, but I don't agree with it. So in a sense, you're asking me to
Yeah, I'm trying to just get maybe a definition, maybe even a historical, traditional definition of like the right versus the left.
Or
And
standard
I guess what you're
narrative.
saying is that it's almost impossible to put any of those parties on either side right now.
the media will consistently label conservatives as right wing because they want lower taxes, they want lower regulation of corporations, things of that nature. And on the left, they'll say they want more of a social contract type mindset. So I guess traditionally conservatives will be more individualistic, and liberals within North American spectrum will be more communitarian, more of a social contract. We have an empathetic debt to each other. We live in a society, so it's basically a group mindset. The reason I'm so resistant to your question is that I consider myself the ultimate individualist, and I can't stand the conservatives. So that's why, in a way, it's a.
All right,
Isn't it the thing about labeling things? Like, it doesn't really make sense anymore because you see like people on the left do things that you would normally associate with people on the right.
Yeah.
So it's like labeling this, and I think one thing that plays a huge role in it is I know more about American politics than Canadian one. Basically, one of the reasons is I can't vote just yet. And it seems to me that like U.S. policies is really based on who funds the campaign of whoever is running for the.
Obamacare was a right-wing Mitt Romney, it was a right-wing Heritage Foundation plan. And then Obama took it on, and suddenly it became the biggest fight that the right was against. But the initial intellectual creators of Obamacare, even before Mitt Romney, was the Heritage Foundation, which is the right-wing think tank. So these things flip around, and my objection to labels is that they're used to manipulate people. My mother will not vote for NDP. When I came to Canada, because we escaped from Czechoslovakia, and there was an understanding within all the Eastern European immigrants that the NDP was funded by the KGB, which I'm not saying is true, but all of us Eastern Europeans, we just assumed NDP called themselves socialists, so they were funded by the KGB, and there's no way we would vote for the NDP. My mother will have a heart attack when she finds out that I'm probably going to vote for the NDP. But these labels, they stick on and they're used to manipulate
That's right.
people. And my mom will probably still, I don't know if she'll still vote conservative or not. I think this year she might not. But she's traditionally voted conservative just because she thought they were right and they escaped from a left country. And so she wanted to get as far away from the left as possible. We had 1 year, the last year I voted, 4 voting members of my family voted for 4 different political parties. And I like that. I think that's a sign of a healthy open-mindedness that you can, and Canada's much, much better in the States for that. In the States, the independent population that actually shifts parties is something like 5% of the electorate. The other 95% is set no matter what the parties do. They're set and that's what they vote every year. And I'm hoping, Canada, I remember when Kim Campbell went from majority to 2 seats because she was the first one to bring in negative. Kim Campbell was the progressive conservative leader in 1980 something, 82, I think. No, it was after Mulroney.
Yeah, it was later.
It was after
90s,
Mulroney.
I think.
Yeah,
Early
it
90s.
was 90s. Anyway, she destroyed the Progressive Conservative Party because she brought in negative campaigning. And they went down to 2 seats. And I love the fact that Canadians would abandon their political affiliation because they thought, this is not right. I think we're becoming much more like the States. And that's another indictment of Harper, is that I think he's made us much more like the U.S.
Isn't negative campaigning meaning negative ads, like attack ads?
Attack ads, yeah.
Okay. Because it's ridiculous. Like, I don't have TV, but people have been telling me about these attack ads against Trudeau. I Googled it online. I went on YouTube and saw it. It's so childish, and it's like it's crazy. Like these are not grown-up people. Like, but have you seen the one that it says like he's not ready, but he has nice hair?
No, it's absurd. And the thing that I found so shocking, because I left Canada for 15 years and I lived all over the world, and before I left, Kim Campbell, will be the 90s then. Kim Campbell destroyed her party by turning negative, and that was the first instance of it. And I thought, Canada's too good for this. We don't do this. And I left. I came back 15 years later, and it's almost as dirty as the States. And now, just like 3 days ago, Harper, because he's trailing in the polls, he hired this Australian guy called the Lizard of Oz.
Yes,
his name is Linton Crosby. He's famous as it's called the Australian Rottweiler. He's famous for his attack ads. He went to the UK Conservative Party, Australia. He got the Australians elected, and the whole thing is he's extremely skilled at attacking and at dirty campaigns. And it's in so many different ways. It feels like Harper wants to make Canada into the 51st state. And I lived in the States for 10 years, and it's not something I would find acceptable. We have to go out and vote. And
So your main thing is right now you're voting against Harper.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important.
All right. Well, I was going to say, can you go into the reasons for that? Like, what are your biggest reasons? You're kind of getting into that now, I guess. But what are some of the things that the Conservative government has done in the past, 4 years, whatever, since the last election, that have been so bad or so detrimental to Canada in your?
We don't have time for the full list, but
what are the biggies? What are the highlights?
Well, the highlight, of course, is Bill C-51, and that one actually until C-51, I probably would have voted Liberal, but then Trudeau supported that as well. So, and then just to step aside for a second, I would still vote for And there's possibly a true vote for it, so you have the right to oppose it later on. But my main approach right now is the anybody but conservatives, the ABC approach. And so I think it takes extra 2 minutes of research to find out who in your district
Yeah.
is leading or second to the conservatives.
That's the strategy.
And vote, yeah, strategy. Because if you look at how many votes were thrown away, they were just as thrown away as me boycotting the vote. The people who end up voting for a party had no chance of voting. A Green or say Liberal in an NDP riding or NDP in a Liberal riding. The numbers are staggering. There's a strategic voting website that actually shows the numbers of votes that were thrown away.
I saw this
by,
website.
by doing this.
And I want to bring this up.
And for Green Party, 94% of the Green Party votes in the last election were wasted. 79% of the Liberal votes in the last election were wasted. 47% of the NDP votes were wasted. In the sense of you vote for NDP when it's Conservatives and Liberals in a dead heat. And so 47% of those votes were wasted. There would have been 63 more seats out of a total House of 308. There would have been 63 more progressive seats if people had taken a moment of time to figure out which party has the best chance of beating Harper.
Well, that brings me to the black and white type of thinking. I bring this up all the time, and people think of me as somebody who's against voting. If I could vote, I would vote, but it's just the system itself is just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's called democracy, but it's really that's one side of the thing. But the other side is on television again. I saw Elizabeth May on CBC. It was on YouTube. 7 minutes of interview, and the interviewer, she was rushing through it because there is no time. But what does television show people? It's pumping garbage most of the times. So why is there not enough time? Why don't I have somebody like you going on television talking about strategic voting? Why is these things aren't really mentioned that much? I think on mass media. And so that's one side of the thing, and the other side is the system itself that is kind of, it's not rigged, but it's ridiculous.
And that's the strongest argument for the NDP that I've heard so far. Economically, I prefer the Liberal position. Mm-hmm. The strongest argument for the NDP, other than opposing C51, is that they want to bring in proportional representation. And that would make a huge difference.
What does that mean?
Proportional representation means that you don't just vote for your first pick, but you vote for your first and second pick. And so you end up, it's a weighted system so that you can choose, say, Liberal, but if Liberals aren't in the top two, then NDP.
That's something that can be changed?
That's something that can be changed. There was a referendum on it, but because it's a referendum, it requires 60% of the votes, not 50. And when they ran the referendum a few years back, they got 58 or 59%. They just missed it. And it's so easy to use scare tactics, which is Harper's strength, to say, oh, they want to take away one person, one vote, which is nonsense. It's still one person, one vote, but you have a more intelligent, graded voting system. And of course, right now, the conservatives are the ones who benefit because the progressive or the left vote is split three ways, and the right vote, it always goes just to them. So they I think in 2011 they got in with 37% or 39% of the vote. And in certain ridings they've gotten in with mid 30s because the other three parties just split the other side. And so that's not representing the population of the country. Being able to actually have a graded voting or representational, proportional voting would be far more representational to what people actually want. Because there are a lot of people that would be willing to have Liberal or NDP or Green, for that matter, as long as it wasn't Harper. But the system currently, the only way to get around it is to actually do a little bit of research, take 1 or 2 minutes to find out what are how's the polling in your district, and vote in accordance with that.
Right. So that whole strategic voting.
Yeah. But we shouldn't need strategic voting. We should have proportional representation where that's built into the system. It's a more intelligent system. But education levels are low and fear sells. And it's just...
So if you were to do strategic voting right now to get the Conservatives out of power, who would you be voting for?
Well, my riding has recently changed. North Vancouver, for most of North Vancouver, it's a dead heat between conservatives and liberals. So, like the Lonsdale area of North Vancouver, I would vote liberal. My riding, which is more along, the Deep Cove and Burnaby, they joined Burnaby and Deep Cove, and NDP seem to have the best chance. But that can change. There's still time. So I would encourage everybody to look at the polls right
Right.
before they vote.
So you're basically saying, look at the polls right before the vote, find out who in your riding is
Competitive.
competitive with
Yeah.
conservative, and vote for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, none of the leaders are really pushing this. Even Elizabeth May, they all political leaders always have unrealistic expectations, and their jobs depend on having more seats. And so their primary goal is not the good of Canada; it's to save their job. And so, of course, they're going to be in a neck and neck war until the end. Very few people, although I have heard of one Green Party rep now who said, "Don't vote for me." Vote for strategically. But overwhelmingly, the politicians are not going to tell you this because they want your vote. Their job depends on it. And their funding depends on it. Their chance of running for the next election depends on how many votes they get, even if they lose. And so none of them are going to be arguing in favor of this. The only thing is Harper has done so much damage that now there is leadnow.ca and the strategic voting site where people are pushing this idea. It's the first time, and it shows just how much damage Harper has done, that people who are not dogmatic to any one party but realize that we can't let this damage go on.
Yeah, I had another question. Trying to remember what it is. Your beer is really kicking in right now. One beer, and I gotta say,
I know. I
Yeah,
haven't had
nice.
none yet.
I'm gonna have to
We
get
have
into
two
another one in
more,
about
but
a
we have
second.
4 people.
Well, we can divide that up.
share it, yeah.
We can share that.
See, that's pure politics. That's democratic.
All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and maybe you can go into. I was following the Bill C-51 stuff for a while, and I was wondering if you could just get into some of the details around that, like what it entailed and why it was so bad, and why you were so against it.
Oh, it's been a while since I read the exact details, but the number one reason, it's extremely broadly written. It says that first of all, it creates a secret police force. 30 years ago, our CMP was a spy agency as well as a police force. Thank you. And there were a lot of scandals, and so basically CSIS was created to be Canada's spy agents, Canada's CIA, and with the idea that you need to separate spy functions or intelligence, national security intelligence functions from domestic policing, because when you mix those two together, you always get abuses. Now, C-51 empowers a secret police force, CSIS to act as a police force. It empowers detention of anybody advocating terrorism. So basically, it's censorship. You don't have to actually commit terrorism. You can just advocate it. So whatever your politics are in Israel-Palestine, if you support Hamas, which is technically a terrorist organization, you could theoretically be put in jail just for speech. Now, what it also does, it has an extremely broad empowerment to shut down websites and arrest people for endangering the national security of Canada, and it includes economically.
Podcasts?
Well, if our podcast damages the economy by I say, don't buy from McDonald's because they support the Conservatives. I'm making it up. I say, don't buy from McDonald's because they're supporting the Conservatives. That's going to damage Canadian, maybe not McDonald's. I'd say boycott Canadian products because until the Conservatives are kicked out. That could be damaging the economic interests of Canada. And so by doing that, I could be arrested. Like, it's a crazy bill.
Would they shut down the podcast?
They could shut down the website.
They could shut down the website and the podcast, yeah. It's not just websites, it's anybody advocating.
That'd be an amazing goal.
They get shut down.
No, they're not going to do it right away, but the idea is...
What would we have to do for them to do that?
That'd be great marketing, wouldn't it?
Oh, it'd be amazing. That's what I'm getting at. What could we do now? We'll get you on every week. With less and less clothes
until I
and
get
more and more
arrested,
beer. No, sorry.
And obviously they're not gonna overreach like
Yeah.
that right away. But the idea that, well, let's give them the power and they won't abuse it, that's been proven over all of human history to be a deadly approach to managing. The entire Western democracies were built on checks and balances. You have guardians, you have the police, then you have somebody with an oversight of the police. You have a presidency, but you have a legislature to counter that, and you have a judiciary to counter both. You need checks and balances to have a functioning democratic system. If not, you end up with like Putin, where it's basically a monarchy. And that's the kind of police mindset that C51 tries to enshrine. There's a reason that 4 prime ministers, the Canadian Bar Association, even the Canadian business leaders, everybody, or not everybody, very many people were opposing it. But he pushed it through because we have become so pathetic with the idea of fear that 2 terrorists.
How did that get voted through, though? Like, if so many
Fear,
people
I
were
think
so
that's
against it, like, who voted it through? Who?
It was the conservatives and the liberals. The conservatives, because their constituency tends to be, it's not the American libertarian type of right generally. It's the law and order kind of quasi-fascist. Let's control everything. And fear. There were a couple of lone wolf terrorists, and Harper was marketing it as, he was always presenting that as, look, the Islamic terrorists are on our soil now. These were 2 disturbed individuals, but it was the marketing opportunity that he needed to sell it. And people don't look at things statistically. They don't look at the fact that you have a higher chance of being hit by lightning in Canada than by a terrorist attack. They feel the emotion. TV primes us for that. TV is constantly priming us. We want to feel like we're in this 24 CSI. We're in a war, that we're at risk. We see danger. We see Syrian war. We see terrorism all over the world. We see ISIS, and we feel like they're next door. Our brains were not developed to realize that this is still 10,000 miles away. And so we have that fear. We have that slightly xenophobic mindset. And it all works off very primal, primitive emotions, but it does work. And then the police support it because it increases their budget. And then a lot of people there's still this mindset in Canada that the police are good. But again, they're an institution. I have some fantastic police friends, and they're actually the type of people that you would want as your buddy, because if the zombie apocalypse comes, they'll look out for you and you look out for them. And they're good people. But as an institution, the police have budgets that they need to fulfill. And so it's in their interest to play up the fear of terrorism. And it's not even that it's malicious. That's what they do day in, day out. So that's what becomes their context. What becomes their role. They look for bad guys. They are sent out to calls. They're always thinking about guns and bombs, and so that magnifies in their mental perception. And so it doesn't have to be any malice involved. It's just lack of rational, cold-blooded thinking about what is the real risk here.
Well, this is a method that is being used in. I mean, today is September 11th, so it's worth noting that after 9/11, TSA was born.
Yeah.
One of the many things that happened in the U.S., but TSA was born. They haven't caught anyone.
Not a single
And
person.
the billions of dollars of money that went into them.
And the billions of people groped for
Right.
no reason.
Yeah, and many of these TSA agents have been caught stealing from people. So it's a well-known tactic that whether or not, I mean, there are conspiracy theories about that these are actually false flags to do this, but even if they're not, and I don't take any side, but even if they're not, and it's just the terrorists who attack us, still the way that they're being used, as you mentioned, like Harper used those 2 guys as a great excuse to bring forward these the C51, and it's just all history is showing us that this tactic has always been in place, and anything that happens, they use the fear, they pump it out in mass media and put the fear. And by the way, it's working. I mean, I was talking to one of my relatives, and they're completely for monitoring people, and they're for NSA, they're for Bill C-51. I was talking to a family, a relative, and they're saying that we should be safe. I mean, who's going to keep us safe? So it's working on people.
And you don't need false flag operations. I honestly
Yeah.
think you don't need, and 911 is an inside job. All you need is people who, because it's a very complicated, messy world. And you do have crazy terrorists. Look at ISIS. I mean, the people are out there, and the way the news aggregates information from all over the world, all you have to do is have a little bit of patience, and some crazy shit will happen. And then they have people ready. There's a crisis is an opportunity.
Mhm.
Every crisis is always an opportunity, and there are a lot of people who Wall Street understands this all the time. You never let a crisis go to waste. And the conservative kind of the fear porn apparatus, it's ready for this. And whenever there's a crisis, they are not going to let it go to waste. They're going to turn it into an opportunity to pass more of their agenda.
What would you say then? Let's say, for example, this is all true in the sense that they want to pass Bill C-51 and they want to monitor us. Why are they pushing for it so hard then? Like, what's the end goal in their mind? You know, it's like, so, okay, so they're pushing, terrorism as a reason to pass Bill C-51. But if that's not the true reason for it, then why are they doing it?
Oh, it is a true reason. It's a combination. I think if you put yourself in the conservative mind, and this is the aspect of the conservative mind I have the hardest time entering. But if you put it in their mind, they really see the world as good versus evil, black versus white, and they feel like they're fighting a good fight. And these are barbarians and it's true. I mean, before Ayal Kurdi, there were 2,000 Syrian children killed in the Syrian war by ISIS and then Assad. Like the documented number is 2,000. There are Facebook pictures where you can see all of them. Or not all of them, but hundreds of them. And so they look at this and they see it as evil, and I agree it is evil. But the human brain did not evolve to deal with risks that we face today. We evolved to deal with a tiger growling at us and we run away and then it's done. But the tiger is right there. That noise, that growl is right there next to us. And we evolved to be risk averse. Whether we hear a growl, whether it's a tiger or a raccoon, it's better to run away and be safe than sorry. But we're applying that kind of very simplistic risk analysis mechanism to very, very complex things and things that are very, very far away. So we hear a growl, it might be Middle East, but our brain doesn't factor in the statistical probability of it impacting us. It reacts the same way as if that tiger were growling next door.
Right. So that means it's basically nothing. The risk is almost
the
nothing.
risk is almost nothing,
Okay.
but there are a lot of people who are primed towards feeling the risk. There's a woman in my complex who was on the verge of calling the police because a couple of kids were shining a laser pointer at her dog. And she was extremely freaked out and wanted to call the police. And we live in such a safe environment that anything that looks dangerous, we have no tolerance for danger anymore. We're so protected constantly. The police, they want to they want to be the good guys. They want to protect the sheep from the wolves. And they're the blue line that protects the sheep from the wolves. And so they end up, that's what they think. So you end up, if you don't act like a sheep, then by definition you must be a wolf. So that's why they end up having a hard time. Unless you're a member of the police, unless you're a member of the team, they will end up being suspicious of you if you don't act like a sheep. But they don't see themselves as doing anything bad. They see themselves as protecting the sheep, which is us. Until we start arguing back, then maybe we're wolves and need to be stopped as well. But this idea that in their own head, and that's why individual basis, I've known a lot of cops. They really are, most of them, in it to do good, but their risk processing is based on experiences with overwhelmingly bad people, so they see the worst in everything, and they tend to be black and white thinkers.
Right.
And then the population.
So I'm going to just extrapolate a little bit what you're saying. So you're saying that people who are actually pushing Bill 51 actually might have good intentions behind it, but the danger is now you put that bill in place, what abuses might come from that later on.
I think overwhelmingly yes. I think at the very highest level, somebody like Harper will have multiple agendas simultaneously. Nobody likes to think of themselves as being an evil guy. Nobody. Harper is not thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be nefarious, Doctor Evil, and pass this bill and get control." He really thinks he's supporting people, but he knows that this is a political issue that will sell. I think Trudeau, when he supported 51, was probably thinking again two things. One, yeah, you want to keep people safe, but you're also thinking, what if something goes wrong? What if I oppose C-51 and there's a terrorist attack right after, and I was just on the record opposing it, and Harper comes back and says, look at Trudeau. He opposed giving up. We could have stopped this, but Trudeau opposed it, and this is what happened. We have also a very simplistic cause and effect analysis. So if Trudeau had opposed it, there had been another terrorist attack, Trudeau's career would have been destroyed. And Trudeau factored in all this. At the highest level, these politicians are very rational. And so he factored in perceptions, and he decided the risk of supporting him was lower than the risk of not.
Yeah.
And so he voted along with it. And without his support, it wouldn't have gone through. And I was kind of shocked that he supported it. But I can understand the cost-benefit analysis in his mind was very much... And remember, it was passed right after those two lone wolves. And these attacks often have copycats. So you have somebody, even if they're not affiliated with Al-Qaeda or ISIS, they're all accepting in their wishful fantasies, somebody who's on the verge of committing something, he has a lot of hate in him, he sees somebody else does it, this person gets all this media attention, and they think, I'm going to do it too. I'm going to get all the media, I'm going to be a hero for Islam or whatever. And so the risk of a copycat attack was quite high. Again, it would probably have been some lone wolf, some crazy man, who in that particular instance probably would have been Muslim because that was the theme of those attacks. And so I think it was a cold calculation as well, and then it self-rationalized to themselves as well. I'm keeping the country safe.
So there is one of the biggest parameters in this equation is the simple-mindedness of the majority of people, you're saying, because like that case that if Trudeau opposed C-51 and then he got elected and then something happened, people would do a very simple-minded type of analysis and thinking, oh, so Trudeau caused it and his career would be ruined. This is not really a logical way of thinking.
But most people don't think logically.
Right. So, but that's another thing. Like the vast majority of people make decisions based on emotions, really, because like you look at the stuff that go viral or trending on online. That kid in Syria that was found dead at the beach, that exploded. Like that was all over the internet. All right, look at the number of people. I posted something yesterday for the suicide day, whatever suicide day. 800,000 people die every year committing suicide. Nobody addresses that. Like that's nowhere in the media, and that happens here too, and it happens all the time. Like you hear that the SkyTrain is shut down because somebody committed suicide. You see like problems in the east side, downtown Vancouver. You see all these huge problems that are affecting enormous number of people. But there is this one picture that goes viral, and I'm not saying that that's not important, but the way that people react to a very well taken picture of a kid, because that plays with their emotions. And
but especially in light of the fact that there were 2,000 kids killed in Syria as part of this war,
right?
And nobody reacted to those. No. Like it's really interesting how one picture, and I think part of that is that picture could be attributable to the West. The 2,000 that were killed in Syria, the culprits are Putin and Iran and Assad, of course, and ISIS. And we almost feel like, oh well, we can't do anything about that, so we won't pay attention. And it never crosses that threshold to become viral.
Mm.
Whereas the Kurdi picture, it was while he was escaping, and or not escaping, while he was trying to get to Europe. Um, and so somehow that plus it hit a critical mass that snowballed. But yeah, once you get to that point, that picture becomes almost impossible to have a rational conversation. Like right now, it's a very difficult time to have a rational conversation about immigration because you almost look like a monster if you're not reacting emotionally along with everybody else.
Exactly.
And so it's a little bit scary to try and say, well, let's look at immigration from this area of the world in a cold-hearted, objective way, and
Then you look evil.
you look
in some
evil.
way. Yeah.
You look cold-hearted.
So back to the picture a little bit. Like I actually posted that picture as well, and I think people are very impacted by symbols, and he becomes essentially a symbol. Same with like the famous picture of the Vietnam girl running down the street naked, right? And that was one of the catalysts which stopped the Vietnam War, right? So is something like that valuable in the sense where it's going to actually, because what it has done is put all this pressure on the governments to actually do something about it. So would you say there's any value in that?
That's such a difficult subject. Definitely, I'm not a huge fan of processing information emotionally, and I tend to think that policy decisions made in response to emotional triggers, whether they're fear like 911 or compassion like QWERTY, tend to be wrong decisions. At the same time, it is the way our species works, and it was kind of horrible how much the Syrian war was just off people's radar and nobody was paying attention. And so to the extent that it creates a compensation for a level of inattention that, this was a horrible humanitarian crisis and nobody was paying attention. And then this picture, in a sense, fixed that. And so, yeah, there's value in it. And as a human being, you can't look at that picture and not have, it's a heart-wrenching picture. It really is. Like, if you don't get impacted by you are a monster. Now, does that mean that you should stop and internally think about that emotion and think about the whole situation, or does it mean that you kind of stop thinking about everything else and just push through an agenda that is reflected by the picture? I do think that you still have to think about all the other consequences that you're advocating as a result of the emotional decision. And I think that, I'm totally torn. I really, this is such a difficult question because I look at Germany and I'm amazed at their compassion, at their ability to accept 800,000 people when they know they're going to have massive problems. But at the same time, as a voter, do I want my government, if I'm thinking about, would I want to be the prime minister making that decision? No. It's a horrible spot to be. But when I elect a representative or a prime minister, I kind of want them to represent Canadian interests because they're represented to lead this area. And I don't want their agenda to be driven by their own emotional needs to feel good about themselves. So in a sense, I do expect a bit of a more rational approach from my politicians and to think about how do I balance the humanitarian need for doing something, which definitely something needs to be done by the world community, and the consequences, like actually analyzing about what's going to happen when you bring in a higher number of people than you can assimilate. Because if you bring in numbers faster than you can assimilate, if these are people with it depends on an individual basis. Some of these people are doctors and teachers and nurses, and absolutely they're great to bring into Canada. Other people have their manual laborers with absolutely no skills to bring in, and a lot of them are coming, like the Western media is showing pictures with the kids in front, and very nice pictures. If you look at Eastern European media, because I'm Slovak, so I see on my Facebook feeds, pictures from Eastern Europe, and it's guys running. It's 80% of the refugees are men, and they're walking through singing, yelling Allahu Akbar, and with big placards saying Europe has blood on its hands and stuff like that. There's a harshness to it that, how do you integrate these people? When we escaped as refugees, and you saw on my Facebook page, I think that my father still says the scariest moment of his life, and now with that Kurdi picture makes sense. We tried to escape from Yugoslavia to Italy by boat initially when we escaped from Czechoslovakia, and there was a moment where we got caught in a storm and our engine got swamped, and we had to SOS for help. And another boat came to rescue us. My dad had to throw me, I was 7 at the time, and my little 1.5-year-old brother from one boat to the other with the two boats bobbing. And so he basically had to toss his children from one boat to another, hoping that they hit right. Um, and so we could have, especially my brother, could very easily have ended up like this little boy. So I can totally kind of put myself in that shoes and think, wow, there but for the grace of God go I, or my brother. But on the other hand, none of us would ever have thought of blaming the country that we were asking for help from. We blamed Czechoslovakia. We blamed the Russians. We blamed the people we were running away from. We didn't blame the Europe for not doing enough to help us. And to me, that there is a shift. And I don't think that we should let the emotion of one picture make us stop asking these questions. Like, what happens when the backlash happens? If you have 800,000 people in 1 year and they can't get jobs, they can't get enough housing, they start living in slums, they start getting angry, and then you end up having a terrorist attack. Because these are people who are coming from a war zone where terrorism is a valid, normal day-to-day, not being valid, but it's part of their framework. It's part of their reality that they're fleeing. It's part of their education as people for the last 3 years.
Well,
4
just
years.
to add to your point, that top news on Reddit today was Muslim radicals in Germany are trying to recruit some of the growing numbers of asylum seeking reaching the country. So already it's happening. Like they're trying to the extremists, the Muslim extremists.
And Saudi Arabia offered to build 200 mosques. They won't take a single refugee. None of the Arab states, the Gulf states, are taking any refugees, but Saudi Arabia just offered to build 200 mosques in Germany. And the reason this is, I want to get to the rationale. You asked about the labels. If there's a terrorist attack, which statistically, again, you have to acknowledge that when you bring in these massive numbers, the statistical probability of a terrorist attack goes up. Whom does that benefit? It benefits the conservatives, because they can pass their agenda. They'll get the votes. They'll be able to tell Trudeau, or Mulcair in this case, you oppose C-51 if C-51 hadn't passed. And that's the thing that's never made sense to me with immigration. On an emotional level, liberals tend to be more compassionate, and so emotionally, the immigration alignment along that spectrum makes sense. Intellectually, rationally, it's exactly backwards. Immigrants are good for the economy. They suppress wages. Corporations love immigration because GDP growth in the country is productivity growth, which tends to be stagnant these days in developed countries, times population growth. So the higher your population grows, the faster your GDP goes up, the more workers you have, the lower the wages are. It's fantastic for corporations. They tend to be from religious countries, so the whole separation of church and state, it goes more towards a conservative direction. It brings God back into people's lives. So from a conservative perspective, they should be pro-immigration. Liberals, immigration is terrible for the environment because the number one cause of environmental damage for any given geographic area is the population density or the number of people. So it's terrible for women's rights because, again, if you're taking people from countries where women are second-class citizens, it's going to damage women's rights. It damages the sexual revolution. Because again, from any religious country, Christian or Muslim, you're doing harm to the sexual revolution. You're doing harm to Enlightenment ideals that tend to be very liberal. So rationally, immigration should be for it, left should be against it. But that shows how, like what you're saying, we make our decisions emotionally, and then we create an emotional, rational scaffolding to justify it. And the reason that immigration is considered, if you're pro-immigration, you're liberal. If you're anti-immigration, you must be right-wing, is because we do fundamentally think we start from an emotional perspective. And that's why the last podcast I talked about the fucking dead chicken idea. You guys laughed, but
I like that idea.
It was an amazing.
It actually made
amazing.
a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And if you can get past the whole idea of fucking a dead chicken, if you actually look at that rationally, there's nothing really wrong with that, right?
Yeah, but
Now,
but
that's
you
online
if you
forever
if you
now.
if you ask if you ask somebody, should it be illegal to fuck a dead chicken? Without thinking, instantly everybody will say, yes, of course it should be illegal to fuck a dead chicken. And they will not, and then they'll start trying, like working hard to come up with an idea of why. And they'll bring in health reasons, they'll somehow bring in, you're raising the healthcare costs, I don't know how, but they'll figure it out.
There is a huge
Whatever.
there is this huge misconception in people's minds that by making things illegal you can stop them.
Yeah.
That's the most bullshit
Don't add it to
type
the
of
highlight
thinking
video.
in the world. Like censorship.
Yeah.
If you try to censor bullying in schools, doesn't work.
And
They
anything
will
people
do
don't
it
like,
outside.
anything people don't like, they want to make against the law.
Right. Yeah. The war on drugs, absolute failure. Well, as Gabor Mate would say, it's failure for us, but a huge
budgets,
win for a lot of people. But it's just the idea of censoring or making things illegal is just it's absolutely bullshit. So when you bring up something, I didn't hear about this fucking dead chicken thing, but whatever you bring up, I'm not gonna say make it illegal. I'm gonna say educate people, try to teach them and help them make their own decision based on rationality, based on morality. And if they can't come up with the right decision, well, so be it. I mean, you make it illegal, you won't stop it. You won't stop anything by making things illegal. It just doesn't work. Never have worked in the history of mankind.
Fucking a dead chicken might
Yeah.
actually be a good idea. I mean,
I
it's
have
better than
no
a
idea what this
fleshlight.
is
I don't
about.
know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's actual. It's
You can
organic
eat it
matter.
after,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Okay, now we're really going somewhere else.
Folks, we're making on the podcast right now, just so you know. Don't hold us to anything we're saying.
You wouldn't want it to go to waste. Okay, well,
okay,
all right.
Mikey, just
I don't know. I haven't talked for like 45 minutes. I've been drinking beer the whole time.
Okay.
But okay.
Go on.
Well, okay, no, I'm gonna go. Okay, well, we've been going on for like a while now. This is cool though. I think this is a fun podcast. If we were gonna go down the rabbit hole of, let's say the U.S. goes in and intervenes in Syria, okay, there's some kind of military action. What are some of the what is the potential outcome? What would you think? Because I read this thing online that said that Syrian government's backed by Russia, and then Russia's saying don't go in.
Well,
What would
I
happen?
want to take
Or
a
what
step.
could
I
happen?
want to take a step back because that's actually an interesting question with the idea of the U.S. Obama threatened, I think it was 2011, to bomb if Assad used chemical weapons, and Assad didn't. Assad did use chemical weapons, and then the French were ready to bomb, and Obama, because there was no support for it, changed his mind. Now, if you think, again, we tend to have this left-right idea, very simplistic labels, and people don't think about consequences. And the decision to not bomb or not take an action is just as much a decision as to take an action. And I wonder, and I'm not saying the U.S. should go around bombing people. I definitely don't think that. But if the U.S. had taken out Assad in 2011, would we still have this refugee crisis? Would ISIS have been created? Because ISIS was created as the Syrian Free Army was falling apart, which is the non-extremist opposition. First, the Syrian war is so complicated that they need 3 hours to talk about just that. But there are multiple parties. When Assad first started clamping down, the opposition was primarily the Free Syrian Army and a bunch of more Islamic groups, and then some of those Islamic groups melded with Iraqi extremist groups to create ISIS. So it's a very strange game to kind of figure out. Well, we always think bombing's bad, we always think war is bad, but we have 200,000 dead now in Syria, which could very possibly be from being pacifists. Personally, I don't think that balances the scale. I don't think the U.S. should be going around solving problems around the world by bombing. But it's important to think about the other argument. It's important to think about the other side. It's a relevant analysis. Now it's very complicated because Russia has come in with actual helicopter gunships and fighter planes to support Assad. You have Saudi Arabia funding ISIS. You have, I mean, all the people who are doing all the crap. Iran and Russia supporting Assad, Saudi and Qatar and United Arab Emirates and all those supporting ISIS and the Islamist groups, the Wahhabist groups. Um, these are people who are funneling money into the war, and they're not paying any of the price. The refugees are going to Europe. Putin's laughing because he gets a twofer. He gets to screw with Syria, and he totally distracts Europe. He messes with Europe. Europe stops thinking about Ukraine. They're too busy worrying about their refugees. So the more he creates a refugee crisis in Syria, the more the focus comes off of Ukraine. You can do what he wants. He's actually sending a lot of the same units. Like some of the, I think it was the 82nd, was straight from Donbass in Ukraine, went to Syria. Like he's got special forces units going from
Wow.
and the whole thing is such a colossal, as the military say, clusterfuck.
Yeah, you can say that.
It it's almost too hard to analyze. Like,
Well, it's an incredibly complex problem that I don't think either side there is no wrong or right. I mean, the bombing thing, and
I don't know,
I'm from Middle East.
two
I
evil
know
guys bombing each other.
That's one thing. Second thing is you will never know the truth. Like
No.
there is so much going on behind the curtains. Like in Iran, people who claim that they know what's going on in the background, they're just bullshitting. You can't know. It's a complex system, and it's a messy situation in Middle East. It's an incredibly messy situation. I think the only thing that makes sense when people talk about Middle East is that yes, it's most of it is because of U.S. intervening in the first place. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect is yes, there are a lot of fucked up people right in there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The U.S. screwing up Iraq is a huge chunk. But there are other, like the climate change.
Yeah.
I mean, the drought. Syria had a 5-year massive drought where millions of farmers basically lost their farms, had to move to the cities, and had nothing to do. So and they were desperate for.
Mhm.
So you had this so many factors playing into one.
So if we're going to think about, what's the motivation for all these governments or whatever playing all these games? What do you think the end aim is for like Saudi backing like ISIS or Russia backing Syria? Like, what's the end game for these governments? What's their primary motivation?
Well, again, I think that's what we've been talking about. There's no single motivations usually. Even everything is such a mix of factors. But I think some have simpler agendas than others. Like I think for the Saudis have been trying to spread their Wahhabist form of Sunni Islam. Iran is Shiite, so the split goes back, 1,500 years almost.
Mhm.
There's a constant power struggle between Sunni and Shiite, between Saudi and Iran. Russia, Russia has been an ally of Assad for a long time, but I think Russia's primary motivation is basically fuck with the U.S. and with Europe. But they have a base in Syria, and so they don't want to lose that base. So they kind of are committed to supporting Assad because he gives them that base. There's just so many motivations. I think it's.
Do you think would it come down to maybe? I'm not going to switch the cameras right now because I forget which buttons to press on the keyboard. Do you think it comes down to each government staying in power, and they're going to do whatever it takes to stay in power?
Well, yeah, to some level, for sure. People like Assad and Putin, if they lose power, they die. Like they live in systems where you don't get elected out. You
So
stay
if
in
Putin
power.
wasn't in power, you think he'd be killed?
Oh yeah. Assad for sure.
Yeah.
But even Putin. I mean, Putin he's created a regime that has no alternative. That's a whole different and interesting.
But you can sum it up as like these guys are doing this almost because they have to. Just like I mean, if you're Putin and you know if you're not in power, you're gonna die. Someone's gonna kill you if you're not in power. Are they doing all of this just to remain in power to preserve themselves?
Well, again, what depends what you mean by all of this. To some extent, yes, but Putin doesn't have to be like he didn't have to take Crimea. But you could argue, you can make the argument that the economy, Russian economy, was starting to stagnate. The protests against Putin in 2012 scared him, and he knew that the best way to make bringing back public support is create an external enemy. It's always been the best way to create internal power is to have an external enemy. That's why Russia invaded Afghanistan. The Soviet economy was starting to fall apart, so they invaded Afghanistan to focus the energy outside. And I think Putin was doing the same thing with Crimea, and now it's become part of his way of maintaining. He has a new deal with the Russian people. Before, his initial deal with the Russian people was, I will provide increasing economic standards, and you give me absolute power. It's changed now. That's now the deal is, I will make Russia great power, give Russia great power, respect, and make it feared in the world, and you guys will suck it up and take the economic damage. And I think Russians are okay with that. Like, it's a different culture.
Do you think that was part of the U.S. motive for like going into Iraq and Afghanistan because the economy was slumping?
No, I think Western countries work differently. I think Western countries, wars tend to be bad for the economy as a whole. They're good for individual corporations. Like Iraq was great for Halliburton, but the amount of treasure that's lost in the war, and it's not productive expenditure. It's not. There's no multiplier in the sense of if I buy a beer, then that beer company has an extra job for an employee. That's called a multiplier in economics. Spending that money on a war, building more bomb, the multiplier on war is very, very low. So that money is mostly wasted. The idea of making it back with oil, even that, I think, the damage America took from invading Iraq was massive. Like George Bush, should be tried for treason almost. I think that certain companies made a lot of money. I think America as a whole was very bad for their economy. But I think the American political system is so controlled by corporations and so controlled by elections and this rotating door between business and government, where the government scratches the back of big corporations, and when they finish, they get jobs on K Street. They get jobs within the companies. And so individual careers are decided not by what's good for the country as a whole, but what's good for individual companies, that I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. I think it's the corporatist aspect of America that certain companies are benefiting. I don't think America's not run in the same way. It's not run as a monolithic whole the way even Russia's not a monolithic whole. Even Russia has power struggles now between the FSB, the secret police, and the Chechnyan Kadyrov, who Putin uses kind of as a proxy.
So Boldizar, what's the answer?
42.
42.
Well, what I was going to get into, I've been waiting on this question for a long time, and now is the time. And that is, if we had a Boldizar utopia.
Oh,
this is such thing. Such thing.
What systems would you have in place? What kind of because I think you do. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, maybe not. Okay, do you believe there should be systems?
I think we need to we need to have groups live in society. We're talking utopia here.
Yes, Boldizar utopia.
Live in groups of up to 200, because we evolved to have tribal groupings of up to about 200 people where we can recognize each other's face. I think we should all have giant boulders. We should choose the chief by throwing big boulders at each other.
Like in my book. Lift the boulders?
What?
What if you can't lift the boulders?
Then you can't be chief, of course. I'm not an egalitarian. I'm not a lefty. I just.
Oh, okay. All right. So just keep hitting the gym. That's important.
Yeah. You think Harper would be president? Or prime minister, sorry, the Freudian slip there. You think Harper would be prime minister if we chose our prime minister by throwing boulders?
No.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. You never know.
Trudeau just did the grouse grind. He could probably throw a better boulder than Harper.
Yeah, but it's a cardio thing.
It's true. They should wrestle. Or do something.
Bring him to North Van BJJ.
Yeah.
Get on the mats. And I'll vote for the winner.
Yeah. I mean,
I've given up on utopias. I think that.
Okay, what do you think?
My utopias would only work
if
people had a baseline level of education, human empathy, basic things that the education system should be teaching but isn't, or maybe parents should be teaching. Um, I I think it's a big difference. I get in trouble a lot because I end up supporting positions which seem to counteract my anarchist utopia all the time. But I think it's important to have a firm grasp of what the situation on the ground is, what the rules currently are. Even if you disagree with the rules, you have to understand what the lay of the land is and what changes you can make given the current situation. It's fun to think about utopias, and my utopia was very different from my utopia would be anarchy. But that's why I'm the anarchist lawyer, and there'd be no lawyers. But
When you say that though, like, what does that mean? Like when you say that utopia is anarchy, okay, so what does anarchy look like to you?
anarchy to me looks like groupings of like tribes, much lower population on the planet, tribes of about 200 people, or groupings of about 200 people where people can recognize each other's face. They have a sense of responsibility to each other, and by responsibility, I don't mean just duty. I also mean the ability to respond. So if I see you need something and I can help you out, I'll do it. Because I have the ability to respond. So not the specialized, culture society we've created where, oh, that's not my job, or I don't know how to do it. It would require a very high level of, no, not everyone have the same skill, but and you have this. It's the very human, basic level of interaction. The complex I live in, my friend and neighbor is a plumber. If my plumbing broke, he would have the ability to respond. He would feel his responsibility as my friend to come and fix my plumbing, and he wouldn't charge me. Just like if I, can write something from him when you guys were starting Float House,
Or throw a boulder at somebody.
Or throw a boulder.
We still use your waiver.
You still, and
Yeah, you
that
still had the waiver. It's
I
awesome.
had the ability to respond to your needs. So like, why wouldn't I do that? And that's the type of thing I don't.
And you had a vested interest because I think you got at least one sushi dinner.
Did I?
I think you did.
I got a few floats.
You got a few
And-
floats,
and the
but
floats
then
are
you
pretty
also,
cool.
when you were hosting, did you know Boldizar actually hosted floats?
I did. Back in
Didn't
the
you? You did, right?
Yeah, at Mike's place.
Yeah.
Not here, but in Mike's place.
You were hosting floats?
Back when it was illegal.
Yeah.
As soon as it was legal, I lost all interest.
Yeah, you were on board when it was illegal in my
Yeah,
condo.
that was fun. Those are fun days.
It wasn't illegal, but it was
It felt
against
like
the rules of the
It
condo.
felt like a Pablo Escobar
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? And then it all fell
It's
apart.
a nice trick to sneak in like a 5,000-pound float tank into your
Well,
apartment.
luckily, you could disassemble it. You could get it in. We moved that thing in fairly quickly.
Yeah, we just,
Pretty stealth.
we bring in, thousands of pounds
We
of
only
salt.
had one near flood. I mean, it's great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Worked
that-
out well.
that's-
We got to
that's a
float in
great
his
story.
condo
Yeah.
and host people.
And you didn't fall through the floor.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean that's what you said. You're like, I think your concern was like, can the floor actually support that weight? Because it is pretty much like a ton on the floor.
Well, and that's,
Well, I just know that when I walk across the floor, it creaks usually. So
well, when
I'm not quite
my
inclined.
calculation was, I was like, okay, could 20 men stand in this spot? I was like, yeah, 20 men could stand in this spot.
did you hire 20 or ask 20
No,
friends
I
to
just
come over
knew.
and
No,
jump
we
up and
didn't
down?
test it.
I just
We
like,
just
of course they
assumed.
could.
Yeah.
Of course they could. That was my.
See, that's the difference. Instead of hiring 20 men, you would ask 20 friends to come over and jump up and down.
You can
to
see out the
test.
window.
Yeah, that is anarchy to me.
Right.
That you're not
So
doing
it's like
through.
self-organization based off of like people just having like a relationship with,
Yeah, and
with
not
each other.
telling each other what to do. You wouldn't have the ability to force me to walk into your apartment and
ask.
jump up and down.
Well, so here's
You-
the thing: what you're talking about requires conscious human beings, right?
Yeah.
Not the type of people that the vast majority
The
of the
drones,
population.
the
The-
masses, all the masses
Right.
that don't listen
So
to this podcast.
I think if you have a population like that, a conscious whole, you wouldn't even need any system of control. That's where
That's the whole
anarchy
idea,
comes.
yeah.
So even money goes out of the equation. And by the way, one thing that we have right now that 200 years ago was non-existent is technology on massive scale. Like all of these different things, every problem that comes up and people say, oh, but we can't solve that because there is not enough money, or how are you going to make money of it? Or there is another thing like robotics. We have this amazing capability of making a lot of these jobs obsolete. That a lot of jobs that are in our society now obsolete, but it's a horrific thing for a lot of people because jobs are going to go away because money is a system of control. So the utopian type of word that you're talking about, which is pretty much similar to what I have in my mind, requires first people to be conscious. And I just don't see a way to get there without I dare say a miracle type of event.
Oh no, there's no
like
way. I have no
Mushrooms.
I
optimism.
think there
LSD.
one way that a lot of great minds talked about is, and again, people think really badly when you say it, but a certain amount of trauma have always brought people together. Like when electricity and water goes off for
Yeah.
2-3 days, brings people together.
Not just trauma, but the reason the friendships in the Eastern Bloc were so tight, and
Yeah.
a lot of Czechoslovaks who came, and probably same with the Iranians.
Yeah.
When you come here, people say, "Oh, the friendships are not they're not the same strength." Is because when in a communist system or any kind of dictatorship, you tell your friend what you actually think about the government. They have your life in their hands,
Right.
and the only people who have that kind of bond in our society are cops because they're always in danger. You know, they have to watch each other's backs, or criminals because they're working. You know, mafia types. Because again, there's a trauma element of a risk where if you basically there's a consequence to screwing up that friendship, and that's the consequence is your life. And we have it easy. We kind of we get together to roll or play chess or poker, and it's nice. It's a very pleasant thing, but you don't have that fire to really.
It's a little superficial, really, in a way. That's why we introduced, cold water swimming in the river.
Yeah.
It's like
suffer together a
How
little.
come
little
nobody gets
suffer.
behind that? I mean, I don't understand.
yeah. If
Don't
anyone
like-
wants to start
swim in
swimming
cold
in
water.
cold water with us, we welcome you.
Don't
Tremendous health
We're gonna
benefits.
get hordes of people.
Yeah.
What do we want? It'll wake them up. He wants people to be conscious. Go in the river in February.
Yeah, that'll wake you up.
Yes. It forces you to be with your body. Like, okay, this is lethal potentially if I don't calm down and relax and, sit here and go into the sensation and relax. It's all about
Oh,
relaxation.
but you have the comments.
Oh,
Omen, you
Omen.
must come
Well.
to the river.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
I-
new thing.
When?
Oh,
Tonight,
Tonight.
we'll go anytime.
I went last night, and it's the salmon were pecking me and floating by and dead.
We're
dead
almost
formation.
we're probably like mid dead fish season right now.
Yeah, this is the worst time of year
This is
actually.
the calendar for the
But it's the
cow
initiation.
Did you go to Boldy?
I didn't go last night because I'm just getting over a cold.
Yeah.
It's the first cold I've had in years. The river stopped me from getting cold.
Maybe you need to go back into the river. That's the problem. Yeah. Well, we're in dead fish season right now. So, probably mid dead fish season. We have a few more weeks of that. And then it starts really getting cold, which is official cow season. Cows, cold water swimmers.
Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome to join.
Let's do it.
Oh, it's beautiful. Brings you closer to God. Well, I think one of the big things I want to take away from this podcast is the whole. Sorry, go back.
I do want to add a couple of things about the Anarchist Utopia thing.
Oh yeah.
Aside from fairy tale dreams about utopias, I think it's
Orgiastic.
worthwhile to move in the direction of a little more anarchy. We have so much control of everything. Like I don't see our anarchy as a utopia. I see it as a vector. We are in such a controlled society, and it seems to be ratcheting only in the direction of more control. Bills like C-51
It's
in country after
nauseating
country,
for me.
and the rules like I have to wear a helmet on my motorbike. Rules everywhere, signs everywhere, control everywhere. We have. It's the ratchet seems to be only going in one way, and so when I
And
call
by the way,
myself
even thought policing.
Even
like
thought
the
policing
stuff
now,
that
yeah.
you say out there. It's just
and that's why I call myself an anarchist, not because I want to end up in an anarchist utopia where we throw boulders at each other, though I can fantasize.
American dream.
And nobody can make movies of of it. But I want to move a little bit in that direction. And the more we move in that direction, we don't have to go all the way, but the argument for going in that direction, I think, is very strong. And finally, I think the people who question the law, the people who work to undermine it a little bit, the anarchists, are the people who force law to maintain its legitimacy. In the same way that voting, for example, Harper out because he broke the law, the more the people question the ethical nature of the law, where it's legitimate, the more the people who impose it have to kind of stick to it themselves. The more the powers that be, the more the law applies to people like Harper, the more it becomes legitimate. If everybody just accepts the law, a lot of right wingers, a lot of conservatives, they're really law and order types. They're like, oh, it's the law. I love the law, and when you don't question it, that leaves room for people at the top to abuse it. The more you question the law, the more the more the law itself has to actually check those who are in power as well as those who are in the bottom. And so I think anarchists, in a sense, keep the law honest.
Keep it balanced. Is that kind of why you support like people who are against the war on drugs in a sense? Like how you're kind of against the war on drugs, how you're kind of
Well, I just think that's morally absurd. You're not harming anybody other than yourself if you're doing drugs. And the idea of somebody telling you what you can do with your own body is the highest level of intrusion to me. And I feel the same about helmets. And the arguments that people always come back with is like, well, you're raising the healthcare costs, whether drugs or helmets on a motorbike. But if you look at the cost of obesity and smoking, obesity in the U.S. costs $190 billion a year, smoking $170 billion. Together, those things make up 40% of healthcare costs. But if you tell somebody they're too fat, you're guilty of fat shaming.
Yeah, there you go.
But if I wear a helmet, and I've never had a crash in North America anyway, and I'm driving up the healthcare costs because I choose to ride my motorbike without a helmet, people would freak out. I mean, I went for a short drive and I was just fixing my bike, and I had people out of the blue, your helmet. It's my body, it's my head. And this idea that somebody can tell you what I have to protect my head with, or what type of grass I can ingest or not ingest, is just offensive. It's not a free country if you can't control your own body. It's not a free body if you can't control your own body, let alone a free country. Like and people just accept it.
I think if we were living in a sane society, war on drugs was the only thing that it would take to do a revolution. I mean, it's just so insane.
And it's also so counterproductive.
Yeah.
I mean, the helmet at least makes sense. It's rational to wear a helmet. You're lowering your chance of death.
Yeah.
But the war on drugs, it's over and over proven has no impact on drug use. All it does is it increases the profit of the criminals. It creates a whole criminal underground. Countries like Portugal that have done away with it have lowered drug use. So even on its own terms, it's irrational.
Yeah.
And yet it keeps moving. People just don't, like, it's so frustrating. I don't want to call people dumb, but there seems to be a real lack of information processing skill.
Yeah, I agree. This whole thing, the phenomenon, I don't know what it's called exactly, but where people will automatically trust someone who's in a position of authority if they believe in, like the whole shock experiment thing where they had the doctor and the actor in a lab coat
the
pretending to be
Stanford
a doctor.
experiment.
Exactly. So it's that whole thing going on. They trust that like these people know best, and I'm just going to do what they say because, well, they probably know better than me. So.
And that's a conditioning response to kind of our education system and stuff.
But I think it's a lack of critical thinking. I honestly think it comes from, it's ingrained in kids from the beginning. They believe in Santa. They believe in God. They believe in, and it's okay. You want to keep a little bit of magical thinking for a child. But when you have a grown adult who believes in a leprechaun in the sky that decides a set of rules that they're supposed to live by, and we are taught to continue with this, and we prize it. We call it faith. We give it extra rights instead of saying, no, this is not a considered opinion. You have not really thought out the scientific, the rational aspects of this, and it permeates our culture from the very, very beginning, and we don't prize critical thinking. Schools don't prize critical thinking because if a kid thinks too critically, they pretend they do, but if a kid questions too much, it makes the job more difficult for a teacher, which is fine if you have a classroom size of 10, but when you have 30 kids and you have some kid telling you, oh, no, this doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah.
It's just a pain in the butt for the teacher.
Well, it's worth noting that I was kicked out of the school because of questioning religion.
You were?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, excellent.
It's a huge
religion,
right, yeah. If you do that in Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran, it's you can get in huge trouble. I mean, my dad could get into big trouble if they figured out that I'm a non-believer. But basically 2 questions and not. You have to. One of the craziest thing is that you people living in the Western world don't realize is that you gotta say your prayers. You're forced to say your prayers every day, and almost everyone fakes it. And then just imagine the hours that are wasted on that. Like people between the ages of 12 to 17, every day at noon, they have to go say their prayers, and they just fake it. They just go up and
5
down.
times a day, yeah.
No. This is at school.
Oh, okay.
You're forced to do it. You wouldn't do it at home unless you have religious family. I'm glad
When
we
I
didn't, but
when I started high school in Canada, I'm older than you guys. We still said the Lord's Prayer in grade 9, and I had a Roman Catholic homeschool teacher who was really religious, and I stood for all Canada, and I would sit down for the Lord's Prayer and do my homework, which was last minute homework. And she got very upset. She said, "You have to stand up." And I said, "I'm atheist," and she said, "Well, then you can pray to your atheist God." And I was like, well, you kind of misunderstand the notion of. She said, "Well, it's still a religion, so it's a religion the same as chess, as not playing chess as a hobby," but she didn't get that. So then I said, "Well, I can pray to any religion, but I have to sit and stand and pray." And she said, "Yes." So then I went to the bookstore and I got a Satanic Bible. And so I came to class. I started reading out loud from Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. And I'm not a fan of people who self-identify as Satanists. There's something messed up if you have to go to that extent. But to prove a point, it was very effective. She told me sit down, shut up, and do my homework. So it was my one victory in high school.
Yeah, that's profound. At grade 9 as well, man. I was just
She knew if she sent me to the principal, she would lose the argument.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she was kind of overstepping her authority.
Yeah.
Because they were supposed to let us sit down but she was so strongly Catholic that.
Right. Well, I mean, what I was going to say to kind of start concluding this was like, I really appreciate the point of the whole strategic vote. I think with the system that we have in place, if we want to like create a little bit of change, granted, what will that actually ultimately manifest down the road? We'll see. But, go into your district, see who are the leaders, and then based off of those two, I mean, in the rare case, potentially 3 if it's a close race. And then, that's just nice. You have actually more choice, which is cool.
Don't get me wrong, Mulcair in the debate struck me as...
Who's the Green Party?
No, the NDP.
Mulcair.
Oh, okay.
He struck me as a creepy uncle trying to hypnotize you to come to his basement.
But just one note, I want to know what you think is the way that they act.
Oh, it was terrible.
Only real person I saw on that panel was Elizabeth. I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
Only real person who was herself was Elizabeth May. The 3 others were acting, and it's like a puppet show.
but Harper was very good at it. It was kind of amazing. He was spouting made up artificial numbers with perfect confidence.
Yeah.
The only person who seemed to know what she was talking about and was actually correcting him on it was Elizabeth May.
Right.
Mulcair, I don't know what he was doing with the William Shatner smile, but the extra smile and then the pausing between sentences. It was really like a creepy uncle. And then
maybe on drugs.
Maybe he took like too much Prozac or something before going on.
Yeah.
Or Zoloft. And then Trudeau did strike me as like a teenager not quite accustomed to speaking. Not to feed into the conservative attack ads.
Yeah.
That he's not ready.
Kind of makes sense,
But the reason the attack ads work is because they found a superficial character trait that they could feed off. I don't think either of them. I'm not going to vote for somebody based on my reading of how much they smile.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so despite Mulcair's creepy uncle thing, if they're leading in Burnaby, North Van, I'll vote for him, and I hope he brings a proportional representation.
Well, there is a trade-off, man. Like Elizabeth May, in that debate, she was awesome. But then you go do your research. First of all, in economy, I wouldn't consider myself as an educated person who would have strong opinion on economy. But I have a friend who has studied economy and is working in trade, and he's doing really well. And he told me that what Elizabeth May says is just false promises. It just can't happen. That's one thing. Second thing is you do your research and see like she was an anti-vaxxer and she was for homeopathy. and she's a very religious person. She wears that cross, and so there is a trade-off. I mean, she's the only real person on panel and probably not bought off, but
But I don't know about real person. The thing is, being photogenic
yeah.
is a skill itself, and Harper's very good because he's been doing it for so long. She might have the skills for other. I mean, she's actually been in office for a while, but yeah, I wouldn't vote for her because I mean, 94% of Green votes were thrown away votes.
Right.
And also, I think Greens are not realistic. We are a natural resource economy, primarily. I wish we had gotten to comparing Norway and Canada a little bit in terms of the oil and stuff. As Norway saved 900 million into its sovereign, 900 billion into its sovereign wealth fund from its oil. We've saved 17 billion, even though we started 20 years before Norway in terms of extracting oil.
Wow.
So Harper's right in terms of the dollar and there's recessions because of energy, but look at what kind of policies we've had. Norway with 5 million people. Alberta has 4 million, very similar. Our oil patch is much bigger than theirs, and we've saved a ridiculously small fraction. Norway is using that $900 billion they've saved. Not only have they saved 900 billion, but they have free, not just free healthcare, but free dental care, free universal child education, much better pensions than we do. Just the whole social network is much better because instead of basically giving all the profits to the corporations, they have a mandatory 20% investment into any oil project and a much higher tax rate on the profits. Anyway, that's a whole different subject that we didn't get into, but we are an oil economy and we can't just kind of wish away oil. It's the issue is how do we process it? How do we take advantage of it in a way that is going to make us end up more like Norway and less like we are, or less like Russia, and then we're acting in terms of energy policy, we're acting like a petrostate. We're acting like Russia in terms of just, pump it and let the big corporations get their big profits.
I saw this thing online today that said that oil might go to $20 a barrel. Right now it's at 40. What would that mean if that happened? Would that just totally just crush the Canadian dollar? What would happen?
I don't know what the break-even point, what our drilling costs are, but they're quite high. I think they're higher than $20. I don't believe it's going to go down to 20. I think it'll stay low for quite a few years. And China is having a massive adjustment. It's going to continue to suffer for a few years. And they were driving up a lot of the price of oil. So oil is not going to go up. I don't really believe it'll go down to 20 because too many, like Saudis can drill oil for much cheaper than $20, but not that many countries can drill for under 20. They can't extract it for under 20. So if they start making, and again, it's a more complicated question because there are some sunk costs and everything else, but a lot of productions would start shutting down at $20, so the supply would get cut and
unemployment goes up.
Well, not even talking about. I'm just talking about supply demand of oil. I don't know what the kind of the floor. Oh no, nobody does, but I would doubt $20. Just like people were talking about peak oil is going to go up to 500. People tend to overstate these things. I can see it going down to 40.
I think it is at 40.
I think it's.
Well, I could probably be wrong about that, but yeah.
But anyway, it's hard to tell right at this moment. It was going. I was around 55 last I looked. But I don't think it will recover for at least say 5 years.
How come, the Canadian? Do you know why the Canadian?
But let me just. The other thing with oil, though, when oil was so high, a lot of 80% of that high oil price was speculation. So, oil price is not purely fundamentals. There's a lot of speculation involved in oil price, and so it's very hard to predict based on fundamental analysis of supply and demand of oil, because so much of the price of oil is driven by people who are basically playing the market in oil, and they're driving the price up or down based on the speculation. So that makes it much more volatile than it would be otherwise. So that's what makes it hard to predict.
Okay, this might tie into my question, is because apparently in the U.S. the gas prices are really, really cheap comparatively to Canada. Why is Canada's, we're still at $1.16 for regular per liter right now, and which is very reasonable comparatively. I mean, it was like $1.32, but it doesn't seem to go down as proportionally as the U.S.
Part of it is we have higher taxes on oil, but part of it is we have lower competition in terms of the oil companies, and so they're taking much bigger profits.
So they just have the ability to charge more?
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
Which is weird. I mean, it's the market's not working properly because the competition is not driving the price down. Part of it is that we tax it much more than the U.S.
Well, we could keep going. We're at like 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
And what are we at?
Nobody's gonna want to watch.
1 hour.
Well, they'll watch this.
1 hour 15 minutes.
If you're at this
1 hour.
stage,
And I
you
really was
are.
hoping to get to Bernie Sanders too, but
I like
we have
Bernie,
time.
yeah.
We don't have time for
Who's
that.
Bernie Sanders?
Oh my God, Bernie
Oh,
Sanders. He's Bernie. Bert Ernie? No, he's the American who's running against Bill Clinton on the Democratic Democratic ticket.
Is Trump actually like running?
Oh, he's actually running. He's actually winning.
Oh, yeah.
He's leading,
What?
which is mind-boggling.
So
I'm personally way more excited.
Oh, I would love to
about,
see a Trump Bernie Sanders election.
This is gonna be awesome.
That would be
Because
awesome.
well, you guys may not know, but Bernie is actually real hope. Like
Yeah.
not Obama type of hope, but it's a real hope because he's not getting any money from any big players. No super PAC. He's running just.
Yeah, but he's still
people's money.
nationally he's still at 20%.
Well, he just.
He's doing
he
well
just
in
won.
Iowa. Yeah, he's doing well in Iowa and New Hampshire, but nationally he's
Right.
still very, very low.
Right, but it takes time. I mean, he's doing better now than Obama was doing at this time against Hillary 8 years ago. So that's I think there's a lot. Plus, we are a year away from the election, so there's still a lot of time. My excitement is about the debates because there is this only real chance, like a JFK type of personality is going to go on a platform, talk with real players like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. And that has never happened in my life.
That would be interesting.
That would be really
Yeah,
interesting.
even that will force Clinton to kind of consider her left flank, which he never would have had to otherwise.
Right. Yeah, he's going against prisons. He's saying you should jail bankers instead of people who use marijuana. He's just saying all of these big things that
He's saying all the things that make sense.
Yeah.
Which is
common sense.
which is shocking in the U.S.
Right.
in the political system.
Yeah.
And then, but also Trump is saying things that are at the core of the Republican Party, but none of them dare to say.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed watching Trump put out in the open all the kind of the backroom whisperings that the Republicans. He's showing them for what they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame he's such an idiot.
Yeah.
China.
Yeah.
That's all I got from Trump. China. But
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be nice to see on the right somebody who was such a straight talker without having. It boggles my mind. Like, what is wrong with people that he's leading
Right.
the Republican nomination? I keep
What's
thinking
he
it's a
saying that
performance
people
art
like?
project.
What is he saying? What is he saying that?
He's saying Mexicans are rapists, and people love it.
Wow.
He's saying, "I'm going to build a giant wall." It's kind of like the Rhino Party in Canada that said they would build two bike paths, one from Vancouver to Halifax all the way downhill, and the other one from Halifax to Vancouver all the way downhill. Like that was a beautiful platform. Trump's platform is of a similar level of logic, but without the velocipede beauty of it. Like,
oh man.
But it's almost unimaginable that Donald Trump becomes president. I mean, we have to just get out of this continent if he does. It's going to be a comedy.
can.
It's going to be comedy. I don't know. Can you imagine that?
No, I mean,
It's just
hopefully the
ridiculous.
military will have a coup and kick him
Yeah.
out or something. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, should we?
Yeah. So
Shall we?
ABC.
ABC.
Wow. All right. There you have it, folks.
Sum up ABC.
What's that?
What is ABC?
Anything but conservative.
Anything but conservative.
So go check your.
I think we lost any conservative viewers that might have been.
Oh yeah,
watching
for
this.
sure. Yeah. So we're all on the same page. If you're.
I don't think
listening and
conservatives
watching.
would float. I don't
Oh,
know.
This-
Hey, I've been called extreme right wing by people. I've been called extreme left wing more often, but I've also been called extreme right just because I don't want to wear a helmet on my motorbike.
There you go.
So I understand the libertarian impulse. I don't understand the law and order traditional, gay marriage is wrong, climate change is
Doesn't
made
exist,
up,
whatever. Yeah.
the world is 4004 was created in 4004 BC. That type of conservative kind of boggles my mind.
Yeah.
And as a writer, I try to enter people's minds and understand them, but
Yeah.
it's difficult.
Well, and with that said, man, thank you so much for coming on and being, just the catalyst to have this conversation.
Yeah, we kind of got off track a little bit, but I always find these conversations really fun. And like I said, I think about what you would say about things a lot. Like a disproportionate amount that maybe I should, but I'm like, what would Boldizar say about this right now?
I used to. One of the best parties I ever threw, and I really want to make this more often. I had 12 guys come over. We all dressed in robes. We all had hard alcohol on the table, like it was just hard stuff. Black Russian bread, some pickles, and some herring. And we couldn't. It wasn't one of these parties where you mingle and walk around. You sit. It was a big table. You sit, you drink, and you talk. And it was really fun, just sitting and no poker, no talk, distraction. It was kind of like this. This, in a sense, recreates without the robes and the hard alcohol.
Well, maybe we should bring that in.
And the pickles. But there was something really fantastic about getting very, very drunk and having the idea of the whole party is to sit at a table and talk. And this is kind of like a small scale version of it. And I really enjoy it.
Well,
I'm grateful for thanking me on.
This is not the first time you've actually brought that up.
Well, I think in honor of the next episode with Alex, which is going to happen because he's got this book launch, and we're gonna we want to get the word out because it's going to be an amazing fiction story that we're going to get into in depth next time. But is there going to be a website associated with the book just so people?
Yes, I have my website boldizar.com.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the book website will be. I think it'll be theuglynovel.com.
Okay. Cool.
So The Ugly Novel, all in one word.
That's a good name.
Or just find The Ugly on Facebook.
Cool.
I have an author page.
Perfect. So, for that episode, in honor of that, maybe we'll bring your dream back to reality.
Or dress like
robes
caveman.
and hard liquor, and we'll do a podcast, and it'll be the most successful podcast we've ever done.
Drunk people are not often that interesting for other people to listen to. Hunter S. Thompson once came to Harvard to give a talk, and I thought, I loved his book, and he was so drunk he could barely stand, and it was actually extremely boring. I was very disappointed. So,
okay, maybe
tipsy is good, but drunk people are entertaining for the other drunk people.
True,
but
I guess. Okay, maybe we'll follow that
not for the viewers.
past
I kind of like the
experience.
spectacle idea of the whole thing, going to a random bar, all wearing robes and just drinking hard liquor. That would be kind of fun.
Oh, you want to go to a bar and do it?
Yeah.
I think it's very expensive.
We'll
Can
bring
you
our
do it at
own.
the bar? I was thinking about it at the house, but yeah, we could do it at the bar.
I mean, I just want to.
I think we need a castle. We need rocks.
Yeah, I just want the spectacle.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, we could do a bar. Why not?
Yeah.
cool. Well,
Any
thanks
bars
again,
down
man.
here?
Thank you for coming on.
You guys have that bar right here. The you could ride a bull.
Yeah.
Never even been there. I didn't even know
You guys
could
have
do
never
that.
gone. It's a free bull riding right next door to you.
No,
How could you have not gone
What's it
free
called?
bull riding?
What's the bar?
Is it
the bourbon.
The Bourbon, yeah.
Yeah. Have you
I
been?
don't know.
No, but I walked by it and I saw free bull riding.
I've been
I was
in
like,
there
oh my God.
once.
I know what I'm doing after the podcast.
There we go. It's literally
Bull ride.
40
Come on
feet
down
away.
to the bourbon. I wish this was live because then we can invite people to come join us, but
Yeah.
it's not live.
All right. Well, if you've made it to this point,
You're a champion.
write us an email and
I
just
survived.
introduce
We're
yourself.
developing a
I want to know who
team,
you
actually.
are.
We got 2 people now who want to volunteer just to help out, which is pretty awesome. Like we're gonna have people I don't know what they're gonna do yet, but they're gonna help us with the podcast. somehow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
You can have like a man on the street kind of thing.
Yeah, we could have someone just holding a sign, dancing.
Yeah.
I don't know. We were thinking about doing
Or just going interviewing people on the street and asking them if you know who the president or prime minister is.
That's not a bad one. We thought about doing a meetup group for Vancouver real people, and just be like, hey, let's do a meetup and this
Go to the
first one,
river.
almost make it like a social thing, like see
And
who
eat a
shows
lot
up.
of meat.
Meet up, eat meat. We could do that. We could have theme nights where
Yeah.
we do things like that for sure. Yeah, that could be the Boldizar. Maybe that's the one you host. You host a meetup and you make everyone eat
Beef tartare.
beef tartare.
I may have another meat party this year for my birthday.
Oh, you have
next
to.
month.
That's their signature. That's your thing.
That's good.
That's what you do. Yeah, I look forward to it.
I have nobody to cook the crocodile. Last time Tanya's
Yeah.
sister came and cooked the crocodile. It was so good.
It was good. Yeah, I bragged to Lisa for so long about the beef tartare, and didn't disappoint. And she tried it, so good for her.
Oh, it's delicious.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, should we wrap it up?
I'm afraid so. All right, everyone. Thanks for
was
joining
fun.
us.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you again. We'll have you on soon. And Omid, welcome back. It's nice to have you there.
Thank
So
you.
thanks for coming back, man. And until next time, to
To
whatever
whatever
it
it
is.
Thank you.
All right.